Word Balloon, celebrating 16 years of excellence for you.
I was such a fan of the Legion of Superheroes when I was a kid that I always wanted to work with this version of the characters that was designed back in the 1970s. They all had kind of sexier looking costumes that provided almost bikini-like effects for a lot of the characters, both for the men and the women. And there was a sense of the liberation of the age in the 70s. Long hair came into vogue, and there was a lot of feathered hair in some of the cases for the women, and it was designed by one of my favorite costume designers, the legendary Dave Cockrum, who designed the modern X-Men as well as the original Guardians of the Galaxy. And he did this first. He gave all these redesigns to every character. So when I got to create this single painting, I had no gig that had demanded it. It wasn't a deal I had made with anybody, so I started on the piece of art, worked on it for off and on through a year, pitched it to get it made into a print, which it luckily got accepted because it otherwise is a version of the characters that was no longer standing. This was sort of my love letter to the artists that defined that era and characters that really impacted me when I was a young child.
Hi, everybody. Time again for another edition of one of our Word Balloon podcasts. This is a break in between To the Outer Limits and our next venture as far as long form goes, Kinescope. We'll talk about that later. But, of course, tonight, it's all about a movie we've been talking in the background about for a really long time. Yes, together for the very first time. Jemmy Stewart and the Duke made this incredible movie with John Ford, the man who shot Liberty Valance from the early 60s. Well, with me, as always, it's Gabe Hardman, William Meyer, Ian Brill, Jeff Parker. Good to see everybody.
Hello.
Great to be here.
Hey, this is the most bizarre thing about this is that that it makes no sense on the outside to the outside world that we were covering this movie, but the fact is in the sort of post recording parts of the Outer Limits show, we ended up talking at length about this movie over and over again to the point where we just kept going, why didn't we just record that thing about Liberty Valance, you know? And so hopefully we'll be able to recreate some of that here.
Yeah, opening thoughts, everybody, about the movie. Again, I know we all love it, but feel free to talk about it for a second.
We should warn people, like, up ahead. This has one of the great movie twists of all time. And I don't want it to spoil it for people who haven't seen the film, but we can't talk about the film without spoiling it. So we're going to spoil it.
It's been 60 years. I feel like we should be able to talk about it.
Yeah, we should definitely be able to talk about it. But all you schmoes out there who have not seen The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, just go out there and do that. Get out of here and go do that because
it's on Hulu.
Great.
It's on Hulu. It's on Epix right now, streaming on Epix on demand.
It's on Paramount Plus in case you just
I didn't know that
to hate Star Trek. Yeah,
wow.
You can watch it there too.
And it's on Tubi as well. So there's a free streamer that if you can handle commercials. And hey, man, as someone who grew up in the 5-channel world of a couple VHF and a couple UHF channels, it's worth sitting through commercials. It is such a great story. And man, honestly, I'm so glad we're doing this. And I'm really glad that enough of the audience is also like, you guys are doing that, right? And it's like, sure. So Kevin Bixby, one of the best westerns of all time.
You're right,
Steve
Kevin.
Lieber. Oh yeah. Love the theme song. Love the cast. Agreed. Kirk Ireland.
Why you got to keep bringing up that Gene Pitney song?
It's awesome. That's why.
Well,
theme song is not in the movie.
Yeah.
No,
yeah. We'll get into the song later. Yeah. I mean, I found some incredible, just a handful of posters like this.
Oh, look at that.
Oh, I need that poster.
Yeah, isn't that?
Oh,
yeah,
that's
and
great.
honestly, yeah. The fact too that they're other language posters and stuff. Yeah, pretty cool stuff, man. So anyway,
Well, let's do the plot rundown.
Yeah, please do, William.
Oh, nice.
Way to draw the straw.
So I'm on the other side of the age where I'll say the James Stewart character and the John Wayne character. So James Stewart comes to town he's a senator now, and he comes into Shinbone, and it's a big ado, and everyone's like, "Why are you here?" And he's like, "I'm here for a funeral." And the townsfolk are like, "Who died? We don't even know." And it turns out to be John Wayne, Donovan.
Tom
Donovan.
Donovan.
Yeah.
Donovan.
PH.
And
That's right, Donovan.
Donovan. Yeah.
Yeah, not Donovan.
That's right.
Donovan's Reef is a different John Wayne.
Yes.
With John Ford. So the four people that remember him gather around the coffin, and the Cooper says, "Don't worry, I'm not making a nickel off of this funeral." Like he's just like Anyway, that guy ticked me off. So then it flashes back, and Stewart tells the story of the film. So that's an unreliable narrator right there. But he tells the story of the film, and when he first came to town as a lawyer to put up a shingle, and the stagecoach he was on was waylaid by Liberty Valance and his gang. And Liberty Valance, a very cruel outlaw, who was that a cat of nine tails that he was beating people with?
Oh, just a whip, I think. With
Yeah,
a
but
It's a bull whip, but with a silver little fob at the end,
right.
for extra beatdown action on
Absolutely.
Yeah, I could just take you down with
everybody.
a shingle.
And Liberty Valance is played by Lee Marvin,
Yes.
one of
Yep.
everyone's favorite actors if you have any taste. Yeah.
Who's so badass that Lee Van Cleef is a
His
henchman
second.
of his.
Yeah.
That's
That's
him
how
on
you
the
know
left.
he's bad.
Absolutely, man.
But then Strother Martin being the third guy kind of takes them down a little bit, right? Like it makes them a little bit less impressive.
Every gang
But
needs a hyena. Every gang needs a hyena.
Liberty.
So then, while he's recuperating, John Wayne brings him into town to recuperate, and he gets a temporary job on the wait staff. And he says, "We have to bring Liberty Valance to justice." And everyone is like, "Whoa, no way!" And the sheriff, who's very ineffectual, is like, "I'm not. That's not my jurisdiction. I have nothing to do with this."
By the
And-
way, that's Andy Devine.
Yep.
As,
Andy Devine.
I don't know about Liberty.
yes.
I mean,
Very
come
good.
on, man. That nails on a chalkboard. No,
Yeah.
no, wait a minute now, Tom. And he's the marshal. How the hell did this guy become the marshal?
No one
Is
respects him.
Park what's his name?
Who?
No, it's Link.
Link Park something or other.
Appleyard.
Lincoln Park. Yeah, Appleyard. Sorry.
Appleyard.
Okay.
Who is that?
The Appleyard. The Shinbone Appleyard.
Oh, that's
Oh,
Andy's character's name. That's right.
Everyone in this has a great name.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, it's just nothing but good names.
Yeah, I mean, and also the fact that in his past, Jimmy Stewart is a tenderfoot lawyer, doesn't really get the ways of the West, clearly is this fish out of water in a lot of ways.
Right.
It's
But
not-
also,
story.
John, it's just a territory. It's not even a state.
Oh, that's what, excuse me.
and,
They're
Right,
yearning towards statehood. That's like the background narrative.
right. And James Stewart's character has principles, and he has things that he stands up for, and that like it defines his character and defines the path that he's going to go on in this movie, where he does not want to use a gun, he does not want to solve things through violence. He believes in the rule of law, and and at every point along the road, everybody gets compromised in some way on this movie. Yet it is also still like the most one of the most like just genuinely emotional and moving, films. And it's kind of incredible the way that it pulls off this thing of, portraying characters who are gray and, and situations that have, this kind of adult grayness to them. Nothing, certainly nothing like the, white hat, black hat Westerns. And yet it also, it is not, it feels like a movie that has this cynicism in it, but that's not what it is either. It is enormously affecting, enormously emotional, just from moment one. And, the way that it can pull that off, having both of those things at the same time is, I think that in a lot of ways, for me, it's John Ford's best movie. Like, it's because of the way that it works and how great that script is and how effective it is to me.
I agree. And also it's a Western that is saying something in terms of that question between staying at territory and statehood. And in fact, Liberty Valance, one of the reasons why he's there at Shinbone is to keep the populace down, keep them intimidated, and to be the strong arm of the landowners who don't want statehood. And again, Jimmy Stewart's an officer of the court. He's a man of the law. He is a lawyer, and he's like, no, this the benefits of statehood. And I think that's really interesting, and something as certainly 60 years later we're not thinking about. Back then, not too long ago, Alaska and Hawaii were becoming states in the late 50s, just a handful of years earlier.
Sure.
So yeah, I think it was in the zeitgeist in terms of the newness of statehood, whatever. And I just think that's incredible.
I was reminded of this a few years ago when here in Oregon, where I am, the Ammon Bundy gang went and took over state park land.
Yep.
Saying that they had the right to drive horses across it. And I'm like, what the hell is this? Is this the man who shot Liberty Valance?
Yeah, right.
And I guess that's why this came up after everything we talked about, because if you watch it now, and if you've never seen it before, you're going to be surprised at how relevant it is to everything that's been going on in politics in the past few years, right in front of you. You're just, I think people will be shocked. It's like, wow, it's at once feels like a very old movie, and it feels like it's speaking to us right now.
Including, to Jeff's point, the theatrical nature of the politics towards the end of the film, where they announce one of the candidates, and a man on a horse comes running up through the organization.
They get on stage.
That goes on stage, but that's not enough. He climbs on top of the horse, does a lasso, music plays. It's like a whole shebang about, and then the candidate just stands there holding the sign with his name. Like, it's so absurd. But
after John Carradine comes out and announces him with his big super bass voice.
Yeah.
So I don't think that we really quite, so the kind of seemingly two poles, obviously it's Stewart and Liberty Valance, Lee Marvin, but it's also about, Wayne as Tom Donovan, as somebody who is, who believes that, he's sort of the pragmatic middle between Lee Marvin and James Stewart in a lot of ways. Between Liberty Valance,
you got to carry a gun out here. Says it at every turn.
This is where all the imitators got Pilgrim.
Yeah,
right, because he says it like 27 times.
It's true. And also, like, as much as I love this movie, no matter how many times I watch it, I think about the Pixies every time I watch it, because come on, Pilgrim. But it's like, I think that the way that this works, like, the script is so good and the script is so nuanced that somebody like, okay, look, James Stewart is one of my favorite actors in the world. Like, he is basically my favorite actor, right? Maybe, him and Peter Cushing, and there's a couple people, right? But Stewart is certainly near the top. And so, like, and in some ways, his performance is really big in this compared to a lot of other movies. It's certainly compared to, the Hitchcock movies they'd made, before this. I mean, he is big and loud and angry through a lot of this movie. And, in a way that sort of struck me, watching it this time, But Wayne, on the other hand, who is not really one of my favorite actors. I mean, obviously they're John Wayne movies that I like, and and he was he's a movie star. He's playing one character every single time. But the sophistication of this script really and just the context of it lifts his performance up into something that is really incredible. And and what he, whether or not or actually it's just smart filmmaking that they're using. Ford is using the Wayne persona to express these ideas and do something that is, he's just, it's using the limitations of, Wayne as an actor, to the advantage of the movie and the advantage of telling this story.
Yeah, but it's maybe his best acting job.
100%.
By a miles.
It is.
Well, who knows?
Apparently, if you read, this is the thing that was irritating. I couldn't find, and I think we said this, I couldn't find a lot of material about the making of on this, which I thought I was going to just be inundated with. And so to trust Wikipedia or whatever, or whoever on IMDb was saying something, apparently Ford gave John Wayne, who he cast in almost everything, a really hard time during the making of, and it really frustrated Wayne.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that was the history of John Ford and John Wayne, though. I mean,
Ford was always pissed at him for never going into World War II.
Yeah, and I think that Ford was a bully too, and he would get, and Wayne's persona, which is in a lot of ways kind of crafted after modeled after Ford, is he's he's the guy who you can just imagine, he has all of his swagger, but Ford is the guy who basically discovered him, and Ford is the guy who could get to him, and the guy who there's never a version of this where John Wayne is the one in control.
No,
John Ford.
It's like a big sibling syndrome.
I think it's father-son, Frank.
Ford put him on the map with Stagecoach. And
absolutely, and gave him one of the greatest introductions of all time in that movie.
It's a great upshot when you first see him.
Push in. It's amazing.
And if you never watched Stagecoach and you've watched any Western before, you're going to feel like I just saw every Western ever made when you watch the movie, because it sets up everything.
Yeah,
I would say, I'm sorry, really fast, because I want to get on this point. I disagree with you, Jeff, in terms of Ford.
Unpopular take.
Well, Ford knew Wayne going back to the silence, and Wayne was begging him to even put him in silent films. And this is when Wayne was literally just a grip.
Yeah, Marion Morrison.
Yes, and from football player from USC, got a job. Tom Mix recommended a bunch of the football players to start working at the studios and doing heavy lifting, literally. And of course, The Big Trail was supposed to be John Wayne's big debut back in 1930. It bombed, and Stagecoach was 9 years later, and Wayne was slowly working his way up. And he called Wayne, all of them called Ford Pappy, and it's when am I going to get my shot, Pappy? I love Scott Iman's biography of Wayne. Shame on me, and I could possibly during this look up and see if I can find some good back matter regarding Liberty Valance. But yeah, I mean, and I wouldn't say it's a brother, older brother, younger brother. I really would say it's a father, son. And yet John Ford used to just bust Wayne's balls about everything, and was an asshole to him on the stage, and would bully him in front of the other actors and stuff. And Wayne just took it.
Well, what I was getting at is I think I despise the idea of directors doing this generally, but I love it. I know for a fact that you love it, but I think he was doing it on purpose to get the performance out of Wayne that he wanted from him.
Totally.
The whole thing of someone watching the world pass him by, seeing another guy get the spotlight and the girl and everything, and how he reacts to it. It's weird to me. The whole thing is kind of Ford has just spent the past 20 years building up the mythology of the American West. And in this movie, he destroys it.
Yep.
Yeah.
He literally
Absolutely.
just takes on his own, his own accomplishments and says, but it was also all bullshit.
Yeah, and that is
There's-
absolutely what the movie is about. And it's about deconstructing that whole idea of mythologizing the West, but it's also just about kind of acknowledging that we tell stories in order to make things make sense for us, and that's the way that we can survive in the world. And that even when it comes down to the point where somebody whose own story, Stewart has had this enormously distinguished life, after the events of the flashback part of this movie, and he was a senator, and he was
ambassador,
and
at the beginning of the movie, they're talking about he might be the next vice president,
right? And and he's there to and he volunteers the story that undermines every bit of who he's become.
He's talking to the editor of the newspaper.
Exactly. He's telling this story to the editor of the newspaper, basically going, here's, you want the reason why I've come back here to pay respects to this guy, Tom Donovan, that you don't even know who he is. Well, that's because he's this important to my life. And he's basically the one responsible for everything that happened to me. He tells the whole story, and ultimately it doesn't matter that he tells the truth. Even the truth is not, it's more important, obvious. This is where print the legend comes from, right? But the quote. That's basically the reaction of the newspaper man. But the fact that it's that the newspaper man refuses to tell the more the more honest, real story that would ultimately undermine Stewart, even though he's volunteering it, is an enormously great twist that you don't like. The great, the big twist is who shot Liberty Valance, but the twist at the end of it, where they decide to not tell the real truth, is an incredible twist in a way that a movie would not have the guts to be now.
Jeff said Ford basically destroyed the Western, and in this movie, in a sense, in the myth of it. And I think we even get that beautiful image right up front where she goes to visit his old house, and we see it's a burned carcass, and cactus flowers are growing into it, and we don't know yet why it's a ruin. But then you find out later, the Wayne character at the end, who has 1 foot in wilderness and 1 foot in civilization, destroys his own dreams, his own house. He burns it to the ground.
Because we're missing part of the story for people who may need to be reminded. Vera Miles plays Hallie. Hallie is Tom Donovan's girlfriend at the beginning of the film, or at the beginning of where Rance is telling the story, and they are married. And when they come to town at the beginning of the film, Rance and Hallie, she's the distinguished senator's wife. We don't know her backstory, and we find out that not only is Donovan an old-fashioned, uneducated man of the prairie and stuff, she is an uneducated woman of the prairie, and she loves Donovan, and they have this fantastic relationship, and it's very obvious that they love each other, and he teases her, and it's great because it really is this great romantic story for Wayne, and he's got all of his whole life planned. He's going to marry Hallie. He and Pompey, the great Woody Strode, who are they're going to build out Wayne's house and put in an extra room for a nursery eventually, and this is his plan. This is his grand plan. And then Rance Stoddard comes to town, and Rance Stoddard's just being an earnest guy. He has no idea. I mean, he sees that they're together, and he's just preaching what this state needs to be, what this town needs to be, and what the state needs to be. And well, again, because of the events, and he is, of course,
he is horsewhipped.
Well, he's horsewhipped, but then later, of course, he and Liberty Valance, it's building to an eventual showdown. They have that classic in the street gunfight, and it looks like unexperienced Rance, who can't fire a gun. In fact, prior to them actually shooting at each other, he gets shot in his good hand, his right hand, so he's got to pick it up with his left hand. looks like somehow he manages to kill Liberty Valance. Then his whole life goes on, and John Wayne's life crumbles. And as you said, William, at the start of the movie, we see that it's burned to the ground. I mean, he's so despondent that he burns his own house down. And he's in the house. He wants to die. And Woody Strode and Poppy saves him. And
you can tell how freaking strong Woody Strode is.
Yes.
He's literally carrying John Wayne out of there.
But he, like, and ultimately we come to understand that it is not Stewart who shot Liberty Valance. It is John Wayne who shot Liberty Valance. But the thing that really struck me about watching it this time is that either way, it's all of this has been set up about Stewart's principles when coming into this stuff, and that he does not want to pick up that gun. He believes in the rule of law. So whether he actually shot Liberty Valance or not, picking up the gun was compromising him to a degree that I don't think he could legitimately come back from, even though he was not literally the man who shot Liberty Valance.
Also John Wayne's compromise, because he shoots him from the shadows.
Yes.
And that is...
He murders him, right?
And that's the whole point of him being John Wayne, is that John Wayne doesn't do that.
Right. And
he does do that here.
And this is, this is not, this is something that's addressed in the movie over and over again long before you understand that that's what happened, because there's a lot of talk about whether it's murder or not to kill somebody in that circumstance. And the fact that you ultimately understand that Wayne decided that the important thing was to kill Liberty Valance and let Stewart live, even though it compromises him too. Everybody gets compromised. There's no hero
in this movie.
No heroes, no easy heroes, no easy Old West sort of shit in this movie. And that's what's so great about it.
Stewart is so crestfallen, or the guilt is like piled up. He won't take the nomination, and he leaves the room where they're going to nominate him. And that's when Wayne tells him the truth. And you could see a shift in Stewart's physicality after he knows the truth. He stands up straight. He goes through those doors with such determination.
Yeah.
And Wayne just walks off into, we never see him again. We never see him alive again.
Yeah. Again, his life is over as he planned it. The sacrifice. And also, like we said earlier, when Rand Stoddard is telling these reporters the real story, it's like, no. Tom Donovan is the fulcrum that changed this state's destiny. Tom Donovan is the man that deserves this credit. And unfortunately, I mean, in classic kind of Wild West style, again, we go back to the quote from the newsman, "This is the West, sir." And when the legend it becomes fact, you print the legend. And again, it's such a great, honest moment from Rand Stoddard, and the people won't have it. And
he acknowledges that it won't make a difference if you try to tell it. It's just like when somebody tries to ask you something about comics or the movie business, and you bother to explain it to them, and they walk away and they still think the same thing they thought going in. You just wasted your time. The idea, you can't overcome the idea, and you can't overcome the myth. And that's what's so great about it. The whole time, the whole movie is constantly a tug of war between Stewart and Wayne, where Stewart's going, no, we have to be about ideas and law. And Wayne is saying, that doesn't matter to Liberty Valance. You've got to kill him or nothing happens. And the thing is, they're both right.
Yeah.
And that's what the movie, it's a dichotomy for people who tend to want a clear hero. I'm sorry, it's not. They're both right. That's why this is the movie that potentially, if they actually watched it, could unite the red and blue America if they would bother to get the message out of it.
Because there's an interesting thing where I suppose you can say they do win each other over in their arguments, because Jimmy Stewart, Rand Stoddard uses force, and Tom Donovan, he commits an act of murder. You can say he is defending Jimmy Stewart, but he's shooting from the shadows. And one thing I think it's like the Undertaker says at the beginning of the film is like he never carried a gun after that, and so he sort of becomes a man of he respects the law and the fact that after he murdered a man, he doesn't use a gun anymore.
Right.
And so they've kind of switched over in terms of point of view.
Yeah.
Not to. They don't feel victorious. Neither one of them feels.
No, and it's not. But it's not even that that they've somehow switched places. It's that the compromises they've made have changed them just as people. And I think that the humanity of this is what is the great thing about this movie. I mean, the one thing about this movie is it. Talk about sort of deconstructing the West and everything. One of the things you think about when you think about John Ford is Monument Valley. You think about these enormous vistas, and you think about these, grand, rock formations and scope. This movie has no scope. It's it's in one town that we barely leave, and really. It's not a beautiful movie in most ways, right? No, it's shot kind of like a Universal television show or something. Like it's very simple, right? And yet it's easy to look at that and go, well, that's the laziness of old man John Ford and whatever. But really, one really striking thing about it is that if you watch it and whether you notice this or not, I think it has an impact that. When the movie becomes striking and expressionistic is at the most crucial moment of it, when they're in the dark on the street and when this standoff is happening. And I feel like it's like a big, long game to get to this, this most crucial moment where Ford is like, now's the time that this thing is going to look amazing. Now's the time that it's going to be striking and visually effective, because this is the central aspect of the movie.
In some ways, it feels like Ford. It's kind of like, I think the other week we were talking about the Beatles, and I rambled on about how Paul McCartney and the Beatles is always doing a kind of response to some other body on the scene. Like this is his clap back to Simon and Garfunkel or the Beach Boys or whatever. To me, a lot of this feels like him answering Capra.
That's interesting.
I don't know. I don't mean the whole thing is that, but in parts it feels like that. To me, the heart of the whole movie, my favorite scene is when Stewart is teaching how to read.
Okay. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The classroom. Okay, everybody's in there. Like a surprising amount of people come wanting to learn how to read.
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt anybody. I'll let you.
No. I mean, I don't want to interrupt either. But look, that's the thing where Woody Strode gets up and
tries to read the Declaration of Independence,
and he
explain it.
He forgets, quote unquote, the part where all men are created equal. And and then Stewart says, "Yeah, a lot of people forget that."
It
fucking makes me cry every time. I can't handle it. It's the greatest moment, like in movies, right? It's incredible,
and it's surprisingly representational too. I'm sorry, William, but really, in terms of Woody Strode's a really important character. Andy Devine is married and has Mexican children and married to a Mexican wife.
Yeah.
You have the Native Americans in this schoolroom as well. And also, by the way, and I want to make sure that I get her name right, the original story for Liberty Valance was written by Dorothy M. Johnson. James Bella and Wills Goldbeck wrote the screenplay. But that's important. And real fast before, and please, William, get ready. But I think, honestly, the reason why Ford shot the film this way was to make a comment on, you say the Universal Westerns, I say all the television Westerns that were happening then, and almost to subconsciously say, oh, you're used to this. This is exactly what you've been getting for the last 10 years on television and film. And it really is this traditional movie. But then all of a sudden you're listening to the dialogue and watching the story, and it's like, wait, shit's not playing out like it normally does.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about it is, I think by design, I have no proof that I've read to support this, but it seems to me very self-evident. And maybe that's why the critics were like, this is kind of tired Ford. Go ahead.
Literally the last person in the world who would talk about making like big aesthetic decisions or whatever is John Ford.
Yeah.
He despised talking about things in those terms. I mean, there's that very famous, thing where, Peter Bogdanovich, interviewing him where he asked him about, an elaborate question about why, I don't know, and now I can't remember the thing.
Well, he goes.
I know the interview you're talking about where
it's on YouTube. Basically,
he denies that there was any,
and
he's
behind something.
It's a shell game.
Then Bogdanovich asks another question, and Ford just says, "Cut."
Right,
like he's just fucking done with this shit.
Yeah,
there's no interest in indulging in any of that.
It might have been Wayne's introduction in Stagecoach or whatever, but he's like, "Yeah, how did you shoot that?" And he goes, "With a camera."
Right,
and it's just again. I mean, look at this guy. I'm so glad that you found these pictures.
My name's John Ford, and I make westerns.
Exactly,
and but that's the thing, though. He's not I've worked with a lot of directors, and they all have personas, right? Like they all craft personas for themselves, and it's how they succeed as directors. And and Ford crafted this elaborate persona for himself to make him seem like somebody who isn't deeply thinking about all of the shit that he puts in these movies, which he absolutely was. Yeah, I mean, like he wants to present this, this kind of, I show up and I point the camera and I shoot this stuff and whatever. Yet that's not what's going on. He's playing a character as much as anybody else is. And, there is an enormous amount of thought and craft in all of this stuff. I mean, I don't love every bit of every Ford movie, and they get very sentimental a lot of the time or whatever. This particular movie happens to work in a way that I think is genuinely emotional and not sentimental, like the ways that I don't know. I think it's such an incredibly effective movie.
I had two quick things before I forget. One was about Gabriel's comment on the vistas. Correct me, gentlemen, if I'm wrong. I don't think there's one horizon in the whole picture.
Probably not.
Yeah.
And then this
maybe when the train comes into town.
Yeah, and then the last shot as well, maybe. But because there's another shot of the train going away at the end.
The second thing I wanted to say, real quick about the teaching scene, which was so affecting on many levels, because you had the comedy bits in there where the gentleman says, "Well, I got the short straw from the boss, and I have to come to learn how to read." Right. But then to the point that Gabriel made about when Stewart says a lot of people forget that part. One of the strengths, I think, of that framing is it's oblique. It's not a close-up. It's not like here's James Stewart pontificating. It's an oblique shot from the side, and he's like looking at the class. So we can take it, on our own terms.
Yeah, that's a great point. Those are great points.
Absolutely.
And but another thing about that, as much as it is like so affecting the Woody Strode Stewart moment, what happens immediately after that is Wayne comes in and just orders Woody Strode to get out of there and not to take the class anymore and whatever. And all of the things that you cannot hang on to a single thing in this movie that makes you, that just makes you feel good about it or whatever, good about, or is sort of ingratiating. Everything has dimension to it, and everything has some sort of contrast to it. And
Wayne sees with the education, his world is changing.
Yeah,
he tries to pull Pompey out of it, but at the same time, you get a great scene right after the famous gunfight, where Wayne goes into the saloon and gets a drink, and Pompey comes in, and the bartender is not going to serve Pompey.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And Wayne gets in his face and goes, give him his drink, or whatever he says to him or whatever. They're making a point about what's going on in the civil rights movement at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. There is literally no way you can look at these couple of things in this movie and not think that that's what's going on here.
And it's Wayne's rejection of the idea of education that I think is the final straw for Vera Miles, where she's like, who is that guy? Why am I with him? Look at this good man that all he's trying to do
Good point.
teach the children and everything. Yeah, I mean, honestly, there's so many things, these various like interactions with characters that are playing on so many different levels at the same time. And it's, I mean, that's why it's a chess match.
Yeah, and also
you don't realize it.
And Vera Miles is looking at being pulled into the past with Wayne, or going into the future with Stewart. But even at that, we see the future. The future is heartbreak and a longing for a world that doesn't exist anymore, and the one that the movie tells us never existed exactly, right? Yeah. Like there are so many like great, conflicting sort of levels to this movie. It works endlessly. And what I don't know if I quite got to this, but what I was trying to make, one of the points I was trying to make about the big vistas and stuff was just that, and the lack of big vistas in this is that's the way that a Western would be presented as epic, right? But in lots of ways, this is literally the most epic Western, even though on the surface it is, it's small. But what these characters are going through, the scope of the story that they're telling, the kinds of things that they're grappling with in it, it makes it like the most epic Western to me.
I'm with you. I've got some of the critiques of the movie, and this is interesting, and I am taking this from Wikipedia, so grain of salt. Contemporary reviews were generally positive, although a number of critics thought the final act was a letdown. Variety called the film entertaining and emotionally involving, but thought if the film had ended 20 minutes earlier, it would have been a taut, cumulative story of the irony of heroic destiny, instead of concluding with condescending, melodramatic, anticlimactic strokes. What should have been left to enthrall the imagination is spelled out until there's nothing left to savor or discuss.
Well, that's what a moron would think.
Well,
we're also 42 minutes into discussing this motherfucker. I think that maybe they're wrong.
I tracked. There was 32 minutes or so remaining after the death of Liberty Valance. Yeah. And I kept thinking to myself, if this was a modern film, I know it's easy to say such a thing. If this was a modern film, you'd probably have 5 more minutes after that.
Right.
Murder.
Well, I don't know about that. Modern movies certainly have a lot of useless garbage at the end of them, because everything has to be explained.
Then there would be another 15 minutes after the credits.
Yeah. But
they do. I mean, this is one of the few movies where, it's a running joke with everything. Like, haha, they say the title in the movie. This is one of the few movies where you were dying for them to say the title of the movie, and Ford makes you wait. Yeah. And the screenwriters make you wait until the very last scene, till you finally hear it, because he's on the train. The guy's treating Jimmy Stewart like gold, brings him the world's nicest spittoon, even though I didn't see Jimmy Stewart chewing anything.
A cuspidor, mind you.
Sorry.
Oh, when it's that classy, it's a cuspidor. Okay.
Yeah. Or whatever. They've called ahead. They tell him, we called ahead and told them to hold the next train so you can get back to where, they're just bending over backwards for him. And, they're kind of appreciating it. Vera Miles, Hallie is excited because he's just floated the idea of like, what if I just retire and we come out here? And it's what she's always wanted, is to come back. And, she's delighted. It seems like they're setting you up for this. Man, everything's great now as they ride off into the sunset. And then the guy lowers the boom by just saying, nothing's too good for the man who shot Liberty Valance. And then you just see the life go out of them.
Yeah, it's like the end of The Graduate,
right?
Yeah,
like who would end a movie that way? It's great. It's so good.
Yeah, it's like I swear, like the end of The Graduate. It's like a new Hollywood way to end a movie, right? Like it is not.
Way ahead of
it's something where we don't get this triumphalism, right? We don't get that big America won and everything, right? It's
Stewart literally looks down in his lap.
Yeah.
And I think she looks out the window.
And it casts back just on that previous thing they were talking about him talking about moving back, because really all he's trying to reach back into that past that that is elusive for them. It's the motives there are compromised.
Even the truth won't allow them to escape it.
Yeah.
I thought, real quick, I thought it was amazing to contextualize this within a couple other films that came out this year, which I was like, holy crap, this was a year for movies. So Lolita, Lawrence of Arabia, To Kill a Mockingbird, Harry Carey, The Manchurian Candidate, Dr. No, Mutiny on the Bounty, La Jetée, Days of Wine and Roses, The Trial, Sanjuro, Jules and Jim. I mean, it's just like one after
Wow,
another.
yeah, that's a pretty fucking good year of movies there.
It's
Yeah.
an amazing.
Oh my God.
It's funny how we're talking about like the past and future of the West. That feels like you can see the past and future of Hollywood
movies.
right there.
Yeah.
You see a little bit of the classic Hollywood and also French New Wave.
Yep.
How that's going to influence New Hollywood. We talked about the downer ending for this. Every '70s movie had a downer ending.
Yep.
We see like the past and future, right in 1962.
Absolutely.
And then they weren't expecting this from Ford. I want to go back to a couple other quotes from critics that didn't get it. Richard Coe of the Washington Post. The film was a leisurely yarn of boasting fine performances, but was bothered by the incredulous fact that the lively townsfolk of Shinbone didn't polish off Valance themselves. On TV, he would have been dispatched by the second commercial, and the villainy would have passed to some shadowy employer who didn't want statehood.
Oh, God.
And John Scott from the LA Times said, Ford is guilty of a few lengthy, slow periods in his storytelling, but for the most part, the old reliable Ford touches are there. Harrison Reports gave the film a very good, but Brendan Gill of the New Yorker was negative, called it a parody of John Ford's best work.
Whoa.
But again, this is the expectation. There's an expectation of a John Ford movie. They'll accept it from the people that made Jules and Jim, and then all these other movies that are new with new ideas and fresh directors. But it's like Chaplin. Chaplin couldn't escape the Tramp in his later movies.
But it's also the tyranny of preconceptions, right?
Yes.
It's about it's about people coming to something, and I'm not talking about the entire comic book industry right now. But when people come to something with these deeply ingrained preconceptions and let those rule their ability to appreciate something, that's how you don't understand how brilliant a movie Liberty Valance is.
No question. And again, the comparison to the TV shows, and that shows you where some of these critics were, rather than appreciating the film on its own merits. It's fucking amazing.
Well, I mean, we're not gonna go around pretending like critics aren't dummies. So let's they can't figure this shit out in the moment. Like, it takes a while, right? You get so often, we've all we all go through this all the time, right? Where things have things are looked at differently in retrospect, and I think that it probably was easy for these people to come at it and look at the superficial aspects of this movie and not look at what it was really about.
Well, and again,
they're like, why did you let John Wayne win? I don't understand.
30 or 40 years later, AFI has Tom Donovan as it's on its list for top 100 heroes and villains in 2005.
Yeah, but which one is he?
Yeah,
I don't know. They don't have the number. They don't have the number.
No, I mean a hero or a villain.
Oh, I see.
I mean, like, it's not the fact that I don't know that you could make that call is part of what makes the movie great. It's not because he's either a hero or a villain. Nobody is in this thing.
No, he tries to show Jimmy Stewart how to fire a gun. He does. That's an interesting thing you don't see a lot. He does some basic things like, here's how to balance it. Here's what you're aiming at. But then he still can't help but be an asshole and make Stewart go set up those paint cans.
Yeah.
And then shoot one down, so he gets rained down with whitewash all over him. And then Stewart comes and decks him. So he gets a good punch, which Donovan kind of is surprised by and respects.
Yeah.
And even Woody Strode's over there laughing.
Yeah.
But it is a good point about just on the deconstruction front of not presenting something where it's like, and then a guy just shoots a gun and he knows how to use it. It's something. It's a tool that you have to know how to use in the world. It doesn't just like magically happen because we're in a Western, right? He's a guy in this world who doesn't know how to shoot a gun.
Gabriel's comment like 2 minutes ago about, is he an outlaw or not? I don't know if you guys have seen Barry Levinson's Avalon. There's a great scene where Armin Miller-Stahl is talking about Stagecoach, but he can't remember the name of the film, and he's like, it's that movie where John Wayne is an outlaw but not an outlaw, and like they sort of foreground the whole I mean, the Westerns that I love are, you got the foot in the barbarism and the foot in civilization. And you're crossing that threshold between modernity and, what does the myth. And like we've just been, talking about, Wayne in this film is like the epitome of that. And then he eventually comes to, terms with the fact that he's left behind.
Well, that reminds me of the fact that when John Carradine shows up at the big conference or whatever, he's essentially bookending Stagecoach.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Because remember, Carradine's the big heavy in Stagecoach. And then he's coming in and he's trying to keep the status quo of the cattle barons going and everything, which introduces your favorite part, the guy who does lasso tricks from his horse and gets all over the place.
I love how he starts by saying, "I'm not here to do oratory," and then what does he
and then does oratory.
Oh, and he has the
perfect political.
It's as if he has a sort of speech written on a piece of paper, and he crumples it up and throws it away, and then a guy picks it up and there's nothing on it.
Yeah,
like that's
fake spontaneity.
Everything in the movie talks about this movie, right? Like it's always talking about what it's about. And
absolutely.
One of the things you guys were talking about a little earlier about it reacting to other things, like this potentially being a reaction to other movies at the time. Like it's also a reaction, presumably, to the kind of adult Westerns of the late 50s. And Stewart starred in a lot of those, in the Anthony Mann ones, Naked Spur and Man from Laramie and Winchester 73. Like like these, that whole wave of movies that were a more kind of noirish Western where, everything was grayer and everything was, was less, heroic. White hat, black hat, right? Yep. Like, I think in a lot of ways, this is Ford making a movie like that, but he's making a very nuanced movie that deals with this sort of stuff. It
is literally gray.
Yeah.
And again, you're right. I mean, but the Bud Bedekers and the Anthony Manns that were doing the same thing, and again doing it on a shoestring and on lesser films. This was a big movie.
They're not lesser films. They're the greatest films.
What I mean is they're lesser films than how they were released, and not that they are lesser films from a critical standpoint. But by all means, shoot me down, Tom Donovan, from the shadows with a shotgun. I'm kidding. Honestly, let's point out beyond the great performances of everyone we've mentioned. I mean, God, Edmund O'Brien is so great. Yeah. Yes. As the editor of the Shinbone News in the past, also very much for the modernization of Shinbone and what can happen. And but also a hilarious character. If he's not printing newspapers, he's on the bottle. Yeah, I mean they're there for the debate about statehood, and it's like, is the bar open? The bar's closed. And just wait.
Like they literally go to that well like 7 times in that scene.
His monologue about why they should not choose him to be one of the representatives is like, I'm the lone dog howling against the wolves. He's like, I have to separate myself as a journalist from politics. Like it's so right there in your
absolutely.
And we should say there's a great moment of levity after this dramatic moment where Liberty Valance is shot, where Ken Murray as the
doctor,
Doc,
yes,
Liberty Valance is on the floor, and they say he's hurt. I think Lee Van Cleef is on say he's hurt. They don't say he's dead, so the doc shows up. And there's a crowd of people around. He says whiskey now, and someone hands him whiskey, but he's not using whiskey to like disinfect a wound. He just takes a big swig, and then he kicks over Liberty Valance and says, dead.
That was great.
But also in there is the thing which along the lines of being relevant to today, immediately after Liberty Valance is killed, Strother Martin, his lieutenant type guys, Strother Martin and Lee Van Cleef start going it's murder. He was shot in cold blood. Like, despite the complete obviousness of what actually happened, right, or at least what happened in front of them, that he was, that they were having a showdown or whatever. Like, they deny just the facts of what happened. They have this counterfactual take on what literally just happened, much like storming the Capitol or whatever, right? It's they immediately, even though things are completely obvious and everyone can see them, they immediately turn around and start saying the opposite.
They try to capture the narrative.
Exactly.
Also, now they act like they're offended by murder, even though if you look for Liberty Valance, you see murder every day.
Exactly. Incredibly relevant to the
and John Wayne throws them out the door.
That's why it's in the intro. Absolutely. I mean, again, this is back when trailers were like 3 minutes long. Well, I guess they still are, but there were so many great scenes, and I just wanted to chop it down to some great moments in essence and stuff. And you see Liberty Valance strike Jimmy Stewart down. You see Tom Donovan throw little whatever his name is through the double doors and everything.
It's Strother Martin, isn't it?
It is Strother Martin. You're right. Yeah.
He's such a cackling little bastard.
I know. Well, you just see him that swirly. I mean, he became so much bigger and thicker as he got older and stuff. I mean, again, this cast is just amazing.
It is an unbelievable cast. Like literally everybody in it.
Yeah, even the Swedes here in the background behind Woody Strode, and they're classic John Ford character actors. I'll look them up. But they're this lovely Swedish couple. Literally,
there's always a couple of Swedes.
Yemeni,
every one of these westerns has a couple of Swedes.
Well, yes, it's true.
He's very proud when he votes for the first time, and he has his.
It's great stuff.
I'm an American.
Yeah,
he has this.
Well, and it occurred to me, I'm like, "Where's Ward Bond?" And then, of course, it's like, "Well, he's making Wagon Train. He's doing the TV show,
okay.
So he couldn't be in this movie."
I'm fine with not seeing Ward.
I understand, but I'm just saying the usual John Ford.
Sure, no, I totally 100%. But it is the Ford company, like writ large in this thing. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, after this, there's really only one other complicated Ford movie that has, I think is still relevant and interesting to watch, and that's Cheyenne Autumn, right?
Mm-hmm. Where this is probably his last great movie, but I
agree with that. But I just think it's interesting to watch. And then, poor John Ford. I mean, good Lord. We talk about the Bogdanovich interview, and even around that time when he was tributed by AFI, I mean, you could see here that already he's kind of, not,
really fucking old. Yeah,
really fucking old. Exactly. Well, and you're right. He goes back to the silent era. So, yeah.
I mean, look, he was just at the end of his career.
I didn't get a chance to say anything about the use of power in the movie. I saw some quote where people are saying Ford didn't like violence, so he didn't shoot it. But it's every time he shows Liberty Valance delivering a beatdown on one of your main characters, he does do it below the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And it's yes, he's avoiding it, but he's making it much worse.
Yes.
Because you can't see it.
Yes.
So in your mind, oh God, it's a horrible bloodbath as he beats down Stewart and then beats down Edmund O'Brien.
Right.
Other things a nice use of Pompey. Woody Strode is literally always there backing up John Wayne with that gun.
Yep.
Every time Valance thinks he's going to get the drop of him, too bad. Woody Strode's already aiming a rifle at his head, and they have to beat it.
But that's great writing too, because they introduce in this scene, I wouldn't do that, or Pompey might blow your head off right behind you. Yeah. And then of course we get to the gunfight, and Pompey throws
Tom the
rifle and everything. So it's that. Forgive me, Gabe. It's that. Don't have a gun on the wall unless you intend to use it later.
No, totally. And it's also I gotta just say, like, there's something so enormously effective about that shot where Wayne is standing on one side of the street and Woody Strode is on the other side, and he throws the rifle across the street, basically like bridging the gap between between Stewart and Lee Marvin, who are in the background. Like, it's just so, like, that little chunk of it is so expertly crafted in a way that the rest of the movie feels like, I mean, there's the moment where I mean, not in a bad way, the rest of the movie, but like, when, after this, when Wayne gets drunk and they go, they take the wagon back out to Wayne's house before he starts burning it down. And it's like, they come up and it's a longer lens and they're driving up and is kind of sloppily falls off it. And the wagon goes back. It's like a Robert Altman movie all of a sudden where we're just like following shit happening, like it gets, it like the way that it veers between like the hyper crafted part of that of the showdown and this kind of looser thing through the rest of it, I think is a big part of what makes it effective. And it's very subtle, and it's not something that certainly most people would have in their head when they're watching it. Yeah. But it has a kind of cumulative or like subconscious effect on the way you feel about the movie.
You have to think that Hallie just asked Tom Donovan to show up and essentially kill Valance to protect the other guy.
Right. Yeah.
So
and again, another knife in his heart.
Yeah. She's just asked him to compromise himself or whatever for Jimmy Stewart, and he loves her, so he's going to do it, even though he knows that's it for them.
Yeah, but he also is doing it because it's what's right, and it's doing what's right, kind of by his code, and then kind of compromising his code. I mean, like, it's the way that everybody comes at stuff through this, and they're forced to change through circumstance, and everybody in this movie has an arc, and they might have multiple arcs throughout this movie. It's it's just so beautifully done. And
Can we say a thing? You brought up, John, you brought up the image earlier about the beautiful steak scene, which just kind of like lays bare the machismo of both characters, both John Wayne and Lee Marvin, where they're both willing to commit murder over a piece of meat on the floor. And just the way Wayne says, pick it up. And Marvin says to Stewart, you heard him. What does he keep calling him? Dish boy or dude? Dude. You heard him, dude. And he's like, you, Valance. I said you. And like, they're just like, it's a pissing match, okay?
But it's the steak is also cover for Tom Donovan to protect Stewart.
It's his moment to get out of his chair, and that beautiful. It just kind of does a quick little pan where he steps into frame, and you realize just how small that room is, because before it was isolated cuts, but now now you see it in that one shot. Right. Like, oh my god, it's like. But I also, real quick, I love how that scene. The button on that scene is the gang is leaving the place, and Lee Van Cleef just sort of very very casually steps to the side, grabs the whiskey, and then goes out the door.
Again, and I don't think he has any dialogue.
Yeah,
Strother Martin's the sidekick that does all the talking. But yeah, again, Lee Van Cleef, man. I mean, that's again another precursor, because a couple of years later, Lee Van Cleef becomes so important in westerns and all the movies.
The Italian ones, sure.
Yeah. So it's great. All right, we got to talk before we go about the song.
Okay.
It's a great story about the song, so I'll let someone else tell it.
Well, but here, look, I think that we
make Brill do this.
I don't know the whole story behind.
Well, but here, I feel like people are going to appreciate this until we do the song on the show, right? So I'm going to go get my ukulele, and we're just going to do an impromptu version of it where we all sing, right?
I have the lyrics.
You haven't heard Gabe play this on the ukulele. You haven't seen Shakespeare as it's meant to be seen.
Yeah, exactly. I tried to learn it on the ukulele. I couldn't.
There's kind of a delay. So if someone does want to either Steve Allen and word speak the lyrics, that's fine. But there might be slightly off. I mean, we're
not literally going to sing the song, John.
No, but if you want to read the lyrics, the interesting thing about the song is there's a question of whether the song was made after the film was made, or was it truly made for the film? They never use it in the movie. And even we had an earlier comment where someone said, "Oh, I love the theme song," and it's like, no, the theme song is, and it's some, sympathetic kind of harmonica song. And no, it's not Gene Pitney's song. I'm sorry, William. I'm going to stick with this image rather than
it's better. It's better. It's better.
The greatest hit shot. But yeah, the vinyl and stuff, and it was a massive hit. Gene Pitney was a great storyteller, singer. Yeah. Town Without Pity, Only Love Can Break a Heart, and sadly, I was a DJ that was playing these songs back in the '80s at an oldie station, so I do know
it's a great song.
Don't leave out Bacharach, man.
Yeah, it's Bacharach and David. Although Gene Pitney was a songwriter, but this was written by Bacharach and David.
It's in the commercial, or it's in the trailer. It's at the end of the trailer. It's mentioned at the end of the trailer, so I can't imagine them not planning.
All right, I'm going to look up the deal with the song because there's. I
assumed it was pure marketing.
Yeah,
probably.
I mean, or something that Ford didn't fucking want in the movie. You don't need a song that literally tells the entire story of the movie at the beginning of your movie.
Absolutely.
See, when we wanted to do the plot recap, we could have just.
You're totally right.
Played the song. You're right.
But we would have gotten a copyright takedown.
Okay, we got confirmation again. Sorry, Wikipedia, but listen to this. The Burt Bacharach L. David song, "The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance," became a top 10 hit for Pitney. Though based on the movie's plotline, it was not used in the film. Pitney said in an interview that he was in the studio about to record the song when Burt Bacharach informed us that the film just came out. It was released on April 18th, 1962. And the Billboard Hot 100, when the song entered the Hot 100, it was the week ending April 28th, and it premiered, or it peaked at number 4. Jimmy Rogers also recorded the song in the Pitney style. James Taylor, I remember, covered it on his 1985 album, That's Why I'm Here, as did the Royal Guardsmen on their 1967 album, Snoopy versus the Red Baron. But
I've heard this story before about okay, we're going to record the theme song to this movie. What? It just opened in theaters now? This is the stupidest fucking this is not what happened. It's not a giant mystery.
I disagree. I think it is
like they're going the Johnny Horton route.
They're printing the legend. They're printing the legend.
Yes,
that's
fair point.
That's very funny.
The fact is, hey, we just wrote a song about a movie we just saw. Can we do that? If we say
no. I think it was maybe commissioned for the movie, but I'm guessing that Ford's like, we don't need this fucking song. What is this? Especially from Burt Bacharach and Al David. What's it all about, Alfie? What the hell is that?
It's essentially, if you looked at probably, I don't know what the price of it would have been at the time, but it's just an alternate way. Instead of running a bunch of ads for the movie, you get it out on the radio. And it's, again, Johnny Horton singing about in 1840, you took a little trip, blah, 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 that sort of thing. Yeah. Those catchy, stupid tunes would go a long way and get the word out on your movie,
Yeah,
or Daniel Boone or whatever.
When Liberty Valance rode to town, the women folk would hide. When Liberty Valance walked around, the men would step aside because the point of a gun was the only law that Liberty understood. So that's some of it right there. And then the love of a girl can make a man stay on when he should go, stay on, just trying to build a peaceful life where love is free to grow. I mean, you're right, Gabe. But no, this entire song telegraphs the whole
Ford
movie.
Would have hated this.
And that's what I'm saying is I could totally see Ford going, all right, give me this piece of shit. And it's like, no, I don't need this tip in the whole fucking movie. Goodbye.
I still bet Ford didn't listen to 10 seconds of it before he turned it off or walked out.
I bet he read it. I'm betting he read the lyrics, and it's like, this is too on the money, and I'm trying to surprise people and then give them a movie, as opposed to like Hitchcock, don't let anyone in after 15 minutes of the film.
Yeah, it's sort of the studio's way of trying to okay, you wouldn't give us our notes. You wouldn't take our notes, so we're going to sit there and try to get the word out on this that we think needs to be out there.
Well, and again, this is the time of storytelling Western songs. And I mean, again, it made it to number 4. So it was obviously a big hit.
It worked. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was right for the time.
It worked. People probably forgot the song lyrics when they got into the movie anyway. Yeah. We're probably still shocked by the time they get to the end. and then get that super downer ending on the train, which I love.
I just realized this is like an Alan Dean Foster novelization just set to music. Like, you know, in decades ahead, you know, Star Wars by George Lucas, really Alan Dean Foster, was out in stores before the film. This was a musical novelization, which is
no question.
Come back.
No question. I agree with that all. Good stuff.
Can just real quick, I know we're close on time.
No. What go as long as we need to.
In the opening credits, I gave a little cheer when Edith Head her credit came
God,
up.
yeah. I can't believe we were going to forget Edith.
Worked, of course, a lot with Hitchcock and also Sabrina and Roman Holiday and
well, I mean, she was the head of the costume department, so she got credit no matter what for for stuff. That's the way things work.
But the
like a Westmore, But
when you see Tom Donovan dressed up for Saturday night and he's got his nice suit on and his little tie and everything, it's pretty cool.
It was nominated for the Academy Award. She was
for Best Picture.
Yeah. No, for
costumes. Yeah.
Oh, excuse me, costumes. Sure.
And one of those reminders that everybody in the West did not walk around wearing cowboy hats, because almost nobody does. Even the one Liberty Valance is wearing is kind of like a little kid's version of a cowboy hat. It's tilted way back on his head.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely, man. No, it's
but look, who's wearing a black hat and who's wearing a white hat? I mean, it's come on. It's
yeah. No, it's again, and also, isn't it amazing that it took this long for James Stewart and John Wayne to make a movie together? It reminds me of, and now I'm blanking on the goddamn name of the movie.
Heat?
Heat in modern terms, but back in the 40s, there was a movie that came out with Spencer Tracy and Jimmy Stewart, and it was the only time they shared a bill together. And it's all about, and it's not Manila, but they go to a South Pacific island for rubber, and I mean, it's a great, weird, almost spy movie, and it starts with Lionel Barrymore sending Jimmy Stewart on this mission, and John Agar's in it as well, and they have to bust out Spencer Tracy, who's in jail, and he's the only one who knows the shady things they need to do to make the deal happen and everything. And it's like what took so long for these amazing, and maybe it was too expensive to put both of these guys.
Cost.
Yeah.
But
again, I mean, it's this really was a great nexus for both Stewart and Wayne, who were making successful traditional films up to this point, and then they make this really interesting, weird little movie.
Oh, they're both kind of, we're getting into the. I mean, look, I don't want Hillary Barter to get upset, but it's, but they are old, okay? Like they're a little older, than the characters would be. And, and they, they're playing younger essentially, or at least Stewart is, because we never see Wayne when he's, in the later.
No, you're right. Well, you're right on both counts.
But I mean, they're not, I mean, it is odd casting in a way. Like, you wouldn't think that this would be the casting for this movie. You'd think that they would cast younger and then age them up, or at least just age, Stewart and Vera Miles up at the end. But, which they do to an extent. But
sure.
But look, this isn't in the scheme of James Stewart, old James Stewart playing younger characters. This is nothing like the Billy Wilder. Lindbergh movie where he's playing like a 20-year-old or whatever, and it's like Spirit of St. Louis, where and look, and I even like that movie, even though he's playing.
I like that movie too,
even though he's playing a Nazi in it. But it's it's still good.
A wardrobe and Edith Head and makeup did a good job of guessing what Stewart was going to look like 15 years later.
Yeah.
When you see him at the bookends of the movie with his puffy white hair and everything.
Yeah, imagine
that is what he looked like.
When he was on the Tonight Show reading a poem. Yeah,
exactly.
Terrible poems.
I thought they were all restrained, the older age effect.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I agree.
No, and it was interesting. He and Vera Miles, Jimmy Stewart and Vera Miles, made the FBI story, which is this propaganda for J. Edgar Hoover.
Yeah, but it's also playing at New Beverly at the end of the month.
No shit, that's awesome. I love that. I mean, it's complete fiction, but I do love it, and I like the idea of FBI man Jimmy Stewart taking on the Klan. I think
Yeah,
that's really
I know.
smart.
It is funny that also just that a lot of stuff that people talk. I mean, like that movie is not. It's a sort of reactionary movie, but but a lot of the stuff that people talk about not having any idea happened was literally just in the prologue of that movie. But like not dealt with in a thoughtful way. But yeah.
Yeah, and this was a weird period for Stewart as well because he was doing like Strategic Air Command, which was another kind of pro-propaganda film about the Air Force and what they were, what was the name of it? Curtis LeMay, and then the Strategic Air Command and everything. But also then Stewart and Wayne, Wayne's last movie, The Shootist, Stewart's the doctor. You have a cancer in you.
Right.
I'd have to, can you cut it out, Doc? I'd have to gut you like a fish. And it's a great scene, but I guess a very difficult scene to shoot because poor Jimmy Stewart was hard of hearing and really stopped kind of acting after that, any sort of significant roles. I know he's in Five Oak Goes West as the old gunfighter, the cartoon, American Tail 2 or 3. I don't even know which one, if there was a 3. But or he made those commercials for Campbell's Soup, and it was just his voice and stuff. But yeah, I mean, again, like Gabe said, I love Jimmy Stewart. Tom Hanks has kind of replaced him as the everyman that he
certainly as an everyman sort of role. But I don't know that Tom Hanks has ever had. Tom Hanks is great. Look, I'm not knocking Tom Hanks, but but I don't know that he's ever had that kind, like the for a movie star, the sort of range to both essentially play yourself, but be able to play these kind of much darker, compromised sort of characters, like in Vertigo or like in Naked Spur and stuff like that.
Anatomy of a Murder.
Well, Anatomy of a Murder. Yeah, like I don't know that he's ever quite been able to do that. I think he's great. I'm not knocking Tom.
He's a British gangster in Cloud Atlas.
Oh, come on! Don't be mean to the man. I know that he made the damn movie, but like,
I do have an example. I'd say Bonfire of the Vanities. Because he plays this. It's a shit movie.
That's the whole shebang.
I'm watching. It's funny. I caught the first episode of Ben Mankiewicz's latest Plot Thickens season, which is going to be all about De Palma and these guys on Bonfire and stuff.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I would just say from a broad stroke standpoint that this is a guy who's
right. Well, I'm talking about it from a subtle, nuanced standpoint. So that's where we differ. But.
Well, we got through a lot of this before we got to the.
I like it. No, it's all right. It's all good.
To the bitter infighting, yeah,
indeed.
But no, I think we should probably wrap this up. But I mean, and if anybody wants to give kind of bigger, broader perspectives of it, that's great. I mean, like I think we covered a lot. I think we could probably go for another hour talking about this movie because it's so great and it has so much going on.
It says a lot about America.
Yeah.
All in 90 minutes.
One detail I'd like to throw out because I notice it every time. Liberty Valance, he's playing cards at the end there, and he wins, and the final hand he wins is with aces and eights.
Aces and eights.
Yeah.
The classic cheating hand.
Yep.
Very good. Before we do wrap up, I do want to tease that next Thursday. Are we going to do it next Thursday, Gabe, or we're going to take a week off? What do you want to do?
We're going to do it next Thursday.
Sounds good to me. Excellent. We've been prepping this and talking about it a little bit, and I've got a little theme song, much like for the Liberty Valance one that we've just done. But really excited about this. We're going to take a real hard look at the golden age of television, really look at live television in particular, and it's a show that we call Kinescope.
Our report details how advertising through television transforms strangers to your product into acquaintances, and acquaintances into friends, and friends into customers. You could almost say, as a result, that television puts into every living room a selling machine.
I just want to point out that William hates the idea so much he has left the broadcast right now. It's disgusting.
He hates TV's replacing cinema.
No.
He hates TV. He hates television.
No. And again, I mean, Gabe will elaborate, but I think one of the reasons why we're both like, yes. And by the way, as much as we are at each other's throats, it's great that we do end up agreeing on a lot of stuff.
No, look, this is largely theater. We
of course
are
it's theater.
Otherwise, yeah.
Of course it's theater.
We're friends when we're not on here talking about this shit.
No, I mean we do. We text each other all week. Yeah.
But yeah, no, and actually, look, the last time we talked about, kind of promoted the idea of doing this thing. It's called Kinescope. The ways that they were recorded were, there was no videotape, in the early days of TV, so you could only, film the live television broadcast. So that's the way those live TV things were preserved. So this is primarily about the early live television, and it's. Hey, William's back. Have you forgiven us?
I thought you were cutting the show. I thought you were cutting the show.
Oh no! I just I want to give everybody a chance to say goodbye, but I do want to have a chance to tease.
But
what we're doing in next week, because again, people will expect us to be back next week.
So, and I think that we've talked about this being a very limited series, but I feel like that it perhaps is growing into a slightly larger series as we start talking about the different things that we could cover in it. And I think that there's a lot of interesting stuff. And we're going to dive into the first episode next week, looking at Rod Serling's Patterns, the live TV version of it that's available on YouTube, and then there's also the feature film version of it.
Yes,
and we're going to cover all that. It's a really great episode. It's pretty fucking bleak, but we promise you every week will not be incredibly bleak.
No,
we will figure out ways for it to not be.
Yeah, our plan has become nuanced as we've moved forward, and we will mix in live comedy that was going on at the time, and obviously comedic stories.
And also some sci-fi stuff and some other, just some other genre material. We'll just take a bigger, a look at kind of the scope of what this stuff was, and not, but also, some of these TV plays that were like some of the greatest stuff that was ever on television.
And like The Outer Limits, representing a lot of early television careers that later became film careers. Paul Newman, Jack Lemmon, James Dean, Jack Palance, Rod Steiger, and those are the actors. And then you get the Rod Serlings and from a producer standpoint, the Worthington Miners and the Reginald Roses
and Fred Coe and
Fred Coe and the directors,
Frankenheimer, Lumet.
Franklin Schaffner, who made Patton and the Planet of the Apes. George Roy Hill of The Sting and Butch Cassidy. I mean, that's the great thing, was in this late 40s, 50s period, these were where these guys got their breaks and would write in and direct and act in these things for shit money, but it was exposure and
basically creating a completely different new form that fused filmmaking and television, rather filmmaking and live theater, and in a way that hasn't really existed before or since. No, and again, all these later names that made so many great Hollywood films, and also the properties themselves, and then case in point, Patterns, starting with Patterns, again, was such a popular TV show. Very quickly, they made a film adaptation of it. And smart producers like Burt Lancaster in a producing capacity would see things like Marty and turn that into a movie. But 12 even just naming some of the plays that we're likely going to discuss: Days of Wine and Roses, 12 Angry Men, Judgment at Nuremberg, Patterns, Marty, Requiem for a Heavyweight. I mean, these are all films that we're discussing, or I should say teleplays. And also, it's so much fun to see the other actors that did the TV version and then later the film version, and comparing those cast lists and stuff. Yeah. So anyway, this is that'll be the new show. Well, it's gonna start next week in our same time slot, and hopefully you join us, and hopefully you take a look at some of these things, because no matter what, I think it's totally worth going back and watching some of these shows. Absolutely agree, and I'm hoping that. I know Gabe and I will be there for every episode, but I'll be there for every episode. We'll see if you. That's true. You're right. You are the Cal Ripken Jr. of this podcast experiment. You haven't missed a day. I unfortunately had my one little moment that I couldn't be there too. But we forgive you. It's fine. I won't bring it up again.
Thank you. All
Yes,
right,
you
great.
will.
Of course, you know he will. But anyway, everybody, thanks a lot for watching. Thanks for listening. Looking forward to next week to starting things with Kinescope. But in the meantime, don't print the real story. When the legend is bigger, print the legend. And have a good night. See you, everybody.